I actually think that a key way that the Houston Texans can beat the Kansas City Chiefs is going to be with their football IQ. I thought that at times throughout the season, and especially in their secondary, their football IQ had been kind of lackluster. Like this play will be a good example of it. It's from the game that they played earlier this season, where it's going to be a cover three zone that the Houston Texans are in. And for Kansas City, they have a receiver running around that's going to get right into a middle of a zone right there. So you would think that okay, this route probably will not get open. There's a middle of a zone right there. Someone should be able to run over and make the play. But keep in mind that the guy who's in charge of covering that zone is not actually the person who you currently see in that zone. He's actually supposed to be covering further deep. He's going to be chopping back a little bit. So he will not be covering that zone. Instead, the person covering that zone, which, by the way, that's called the flat. It's the zone closest toward the sideline, 5 to 15 yards down the field. We call that the flat. And the person in charge of covering the flat is going to be that Houston player right there. Now, he doesn't want to just straight up give away that he's playing zone. He wants to maybe keep up the facade that potentially it's man coverage. But the problem with that is right when the ball is snapped, notice how he doesn't get over to the bottom half of the screen really at all. Tyreek Hill is wide open here, and admittedly for that Houston player, he is looking at a back right there who could potentially be running out to a flat in the bottom half of the screen as well. But the reality is, you have another player who's closer to that direction, and you have to kind of just trust him that if he sees that the back does run out and try to get open, that he will then run over and take away that route. You can't just let a route be completely open. He probably thought that the Houston player who's deep right over there was going to be covering Hill, but you can't expect him to do that because if Hill just makes a move and then runs deep, he could get by him, and that could be a touchdown. And as a cornerback who's in charge of covering a corner of the end zone in this situation, you can't allow somebody to get deep because that's how touchdowns happen. You just can't allow that to happen. He has to stay further deep. The Chiefs will beat you because they are very talented, but you can't let them just, easily beat you. You have to make it at least somewhat difficult on them. And on a couple of these plays, Houston absolutely did not make things difficult. Houston really struggled in that regard, which allowed for some easy completions. Like this one's another great example where it's going to be a cover three zone once again that they're going up against. And one thing you might notice just right there is the fact that there are two Kansas City players and only one Houston Texan in that area. And yes, there is another Texan a little bit further deep, but again, he's in charge of covering a deep zone. He can't really cover anything shallow. And so once again, when those two Kansas City Chiefs run those two routes right there for that Houston Texan defender, he's going to have a real conundrum right here because you can't cover two people. So at this point, if you saw this happening, what you should do if you're that defender who's in charge of covering the flat on the bottom half of the screen is you should say, I'm making sure I'm covering whichever one of these Chiefs goes too further to the bottom half of the screen. And I'm also calling a linebacker over and saying, hey, make sure you look out in this direction because there's two eligible receivers in this direction, one of which could be doing something. So you make sure you cover the one who ends up going closer to the top half of the screen. It's possible one of them would end up just running deep and then you wouldn't have to worry about it, but you should have some sort of communication and you should understand what your assignment is on this play. But really, Houston's just setting themselves up for failure by kind of just doing whatever. Keep in mind, in zone coverage, your zone is a suggestion, not something you have to do. But it seems like for them, they're acting like it's something they have to do, and it's setting them up. It really is. It's setting themselves up for failure. Like watch, that's just too easy of a throw to be made there. I mean, you can't be giving receivers 10 yards of separation all the way around. Mahomes isn't going to miss those throws, and if they continue to do that in their divisional matchup, they could absolutely be in some trouble. However, if you remember that game, if you watched that game, you would say, well, wait a second. Okay, so sure, the Texans made some mistakes, but they also won that football game. So they're not really in that much trouble, right? Shouldn't this be more of the Kansas City Chiefs are in trouble? And I mean, I think that's fair. I think it's like this game isn't necessarily as lopsided as it might seem on paper, largely because literally the Texans have won this game before. But I do think that there were several reasons why the Texans were able to win that game. Maybe the biggest reason was they just didn't give Mahomes the ball very much. He had 6 drives in the first half, which is pretty normal, but in the second half, he only had 3 drives, which is definitely very much on the low side. And that's a great way to beat him, is just take the ball out of his hands. And one other great way they were able to beat him was they were opportunistic. Mahomes is the kind of guy who he can make a mistake or two. He can make a poor decision. This guy still is a young quarterback, even though he is so talented and a very smart player, even at his age. So if you can get him to make a mistake or two, that can really be key. And an example of what I'm talking about is a play like this, where it's going to be a cover three zone. And for the Kansas City Chiefs, they're thinking, great, we have a perfect route concept designed to beat cover three. Where what's going to happen is that our receiver on the bottom half of the screen is going to run that route right there. It's a pretty good route against this type of coverage because doing that should force the Houston Texan player who's in charge of covering the zone that it's going to get in to move higher to the top half of the screen. And then when he does that, this can allow another receiver to run like that and hopefully get wide open. That's the way this play is supposed to work on paper. And so after the ball is snapped, one thing you will notice is that look at the Houston Texans safety who is further deep. He does turn his head and realize that something is going on right there, so he is going to run to that side of the screen, but Mahomes is saying, hey, few people in the NFL are faster than my wide receivers. I'm still going to trust them, which isn't a terrible idea, but the problem with it is if you look at the receiver who he's going to try to throw it to, he's just really struggling to get through right here. The defensive back is doing a good job of sort of getting in his way, using his physicality to his advantage while still making sure he doesn't actually do anything that's against the rules. Pretty smart play there by him. But this now means that this really isn't a throw that Mahomes should make because, I mean, there's too much contact. His receiver isn't able to get free and isn't going to be able to get open. However, Mahomes takes a chance anyways. The defensive back is able to run over and get the interception out of it. Smart play by him, I thought, to, opportunistic play. That's really what it comes down to. If you're going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, you have to be opportunistic. If you look at what happened in that game, the Texans actually gave up just as many touchdown drives as they held the Chiefs to punts. They gave up 3 touchdowns. They held the Chiefs to 3 punts, 2 of which were the last 2 drives of the game, actually. And then there was 1 field goal. And after that, there was just an interception and a fumble. And that's what really, I think, the difference was. Taking away those 2 drives and not giving them that many drives to begin with, that's how they're able to get the win. But that being said, if you watch my other video previewing the other side of the ball in this game, I do think that they'll probably have a lot less success running the ball than they had last game because Kansas City has Chris Jones back and the Texans' offensive line is a lot more banged up. So you have a healthier line for the Kansas City Chiefs and a less healthy line for the Houston Texans. So on the flip side, there probably will be more than 9 drives this game, you would think, but who knows? There could still be the same amount, but if I'm the Chiefs, I'm definitely thinking, okay, we'll probably have more drives this game than we had last game, and if I'm the Texans, I'm preparing for that. Like another play was this one, which this actually didn't end up in an interception, but it totally could have, where first things first, I mean, you can tell this is man coverage because of what's going on right there. For one thing, there's a Kansas City Chief moving up to the top half of the screen, and a Texan is following him, which tells you it's man coverage. But you also know it's man coverage because when Kansas City put their halfback out wide, a linebacker followed him. So you know right away this is man coverage, and what it actually is going to be is a cover one robber right here, but a little bit different because those 2 Texans are actually just going to switch their assignments once they realize what's going on, since otherwise a linebacker would have to run all the way up to the top half of the screen. This way they can kind of, skip those 20 yards or so, make things a little bit easier on both of them. But other than that, it's cover one hole, same idea. And one key, very interesting thing about this play is that Tyreek Hill is going to be running that route right there, which is a great route against this type of coverage. And the reality is, if Mahomes sees Tyreek Hill running a go route, that could potentially be a one-on-one matchup, since that's what it looks like it'll be on paper. He's just going to take that chance like 99 out of 100 times. But keep in mind, if you're a defensive back, then you might know this. He might realize that this is going on. So after the ball is snapped, well, yes, Tyreek Hill is going to be open right here. If you look at once again, the safety who is playing deep, he's already over to the top half of the screen. He read this play perfectly and is running up to the top half of the screen to try to make this play. At this point, Mahomes probably shouldn't take this chance, but you know what? Be opportunistic because every now and then Mahomes is still going to find a way to make this play work because he is such a good deep ball thrower. But if you can be opportunistic enough to get over there quick enough and try to make a play, that can result in you stealing some possession. He ran over, wasn't actually able to finish, wasn't able to stay in bounds. That might be a difference in the game, honestly, is making those plays as opposed to not making those plays. I mean, that was already a great play, but sometimes you have to be better than great to make it to an AFC championship game. And if the Texans are going to make it to their first AFC championship game, they might have to finish a play like that or two. They just might. But that's the mindset. If I'm a safety, I'm definitely saying every now and then I'm going to take one of those chances. And also, if you're a Chiefs, if you're Andy Reid and you watch this game, you might say, oh, okay, if that's a mindset they're going to have, maybe I should try to sort of prey on that, where I fake as though I'm going to have a receiver, have Tyreek Hill sort of be a decoy, run him to one side of the field when there's one safety deep, get the safety to move in that direction, and then have someone else move towards the middle of the field or towards the other side of the field, get him open and make a throw in that direction. That's sort of where the chess match comes in. And, that's why I think games when you're looking at teams that have already played earlier in the season become that much more interesting. This should be a very interesting chess match, I think. But also, there was one other key way that the Texans were able to get some stops, and it was with a play like this, where it's going to be a cover one hole once again, and that's going to be Kelsey's route. Good route against this type of coverage, but it will take some time to develop because, of course, he's going to be in his zone and coverage. He's going to have to wait until he gets really too close to the numbers before he will get open. But once he gets there, he should be open. Like, watch, as you see, he's in a good position right now. He just has to get over. We need another 1 or 2 more seconds, but once he gets there, he will be open. He is beating his assigned man pretty well. The defensive player who is in charge of covering the middle of the field realizes this, so he's going to run over to try to cover up Kelsey, but it'll only be able to work for so long. So at a certain point, once Kelsey gets further up, then Mahomes should have a window to try to hit him. But of course, the problem is, if you look over there, there is a lot of pressure coming to Mahomes right now. He just doesn't have time to make this throw. He instead has to run around, and he just fires a shot that just was not able to be complete. Even had a chance, honestly, to be intercepted right there. So that's another key way to stop this team is just getting pressure. I know that sounds obvious. That's a key way to stop any team, but that's how they were able to stop them and get the win the first time they played. And if they're going to beat them again, they're going to have to get pressure to Mahomes again. They just are. It should definitely be an interesting chess match between these two teams. I think they're two very talented teams. Obviously, the Texans have been a little bit up and down, whereas I think the Chiefs have been consistently more good. But I do think that when both of these teams are playing their best football, they're very similarly talented teams. So that's kind of where the intrigue comes in. Again, just making my prediction, I just think Kansas City's healthier. I think that's why they win, but who knows? I could easily see this one going either way. Uh, that's just my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching.